And of all the years that I've known the WASP, they had 4 very specific characteristics. Number 1, they were fun. Number 2, they were feisty. Number 3, they were fearless. And number 4, they would push the envelope out as far as they could. And in fact, that was kind of Mom who would push the envelope out as far as she could. She was one of 3 women in med school in the 30s in Temple University. And when she graduated, her sign on her office said, Dr. Mary S. Reineberg, surgeon chiropodist. Now, for us today, we would say surgeon podiatrist, or just plain podiatrist. And Mom also absolutely loved to fly. This was her plane. She went in with 3 guys to buy this plane. And the 4 of them took turns flying for the Civil Air Patrol. And then the war hit. And I hope you will indulge me while I go back and tell that story. Many of you know it, but I also think I'll add some details that you might not know. Come back with me. It's 1942. The war had never looked bleaker. Allies are losing on all fronts. Nowhere is the manpower shortage greater than in the air. Every able-bodied pilot is needed to fly combat missions in the European and the Pacific theaters. But if the men go, who will do the domestic military flying? Who will ferry planes from coast to coast? Who will tow the targets for gunnery practice with live ammunition? And who will test the planes when they come up off the line? Into that void stepped Jacqueline Cochran with an idea. It was an idea that she actually voiced a couple years earlier to Eleanor Roosevelt. And she went to General Hap Arnold and said, I believe there are women who can take that place. General Arnold agreed. He said, okay, and we will move them into the military. They will become part of us, but we can't do it right away because we can't convene Congress that fast. I just need those women here immediately. And they also agreed that Nancy Harkness Love and her 28 women who are already ferrying planes would be part of the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP. The call went out. 25,000 women applied. They wanted to do it. But out of 25,000, only 1,350 were accepted. Among them, a scrawny podiatrist out of York County, Pennsylvania. And when her dad said, why are you doing this? What are you going to do with your practice? He said, Daddy, I will put a sign on my office. It says, gone to war. So I have to tell you this. Thank you. These amazing women, they all converged on an air base, Sweetwater, Texas, Avenger Field, and they would earn silver wings doing everything the Air Force cadets had to do, but a little bit more. Number 1, those women had to already have a pilot's license. Male cadets did not. They would pay for the privilege of going to Sweetwater. They would pay for their uniforms. They would pay for the food and beverage, and it didn't matter because that was what was important to them. And I must tell you, when they were disbanded shortly before the war was over, those women would have collectively flown 60 million air miles of domestic wartime duty. I thought I'd show you a picture of Mom in her flight outfit. And that's Mom when I moved her out with us to live in ages-assisted living. And I hope you see that little gremlin. The story of that little gremlin is that was given to the WASP from Walt Disney. Walt Disney created this character. You can see it's got the goggles on it, it's got the helmet, it's got the little red boots. Disney said that the WASP could use that as their mascot. Its name is Fifinella. We call her Fifi. And Fifi's job, as she was painted on all the planes, as they wore it on their patches, was that she would take them up safely and bring them back home safely. And when I say that women flew collectively every plane in the U.S. arsenal, they also flew the B-29. Here is a story that you might not know. The B-29 was that big, heavy bomber, the Flying Fortress that won the war in the Pacific. But the problem is that the B-29 was a very difficult plane to fly, and good men had died trying to fly that plane. They weren't eager to get back in it. And Colonel Tibbets, who ultimately would fly Enola Gay over to the Pacific, asked Jacqueline Cochran, give me 2 of your best pilots. He took those 2 pilots, and their names are, I always have to think twice about their names, Dora and Dina. Dora and Dina spent 1 week, intense week, with Colonel Tibbets as he taught them how to fly that B-29. And then they had 1 week to go onto various air bases. And here comes this monstrous big bird. And when the bird would land, the airmen came running out. Oh, look at that thing. And then the pilots got out of the cockpits. And then they whipped off their hats and went like this. And the guys said, if they can do it, we can do it. And women were not allowed back in that B-29 again. Mom absolutely loved everything that she did. There's a picture of her in her Santiago blues. But I have to tell you, it was not without hazard, even with Fifi flying on the nose cone of those planes. 38 of them died in the course of duty. But because they were not considered official military, there were no benefits. And at least in one case, they passed the hat to send the body home to the parents. And the parents, they could not put a flag on the coffin. They were not allowed to put a gold star on the window that said, I have lost a child in active service to the war. And when it was time to be disbanded, because Congress decided they would not allow women to fly, and some of the stuff that they wrote was incredible. Women have no business being in the cockpits of planes. How can they take jobs of men that will be coming back from war? And some of them even wrote that if they wanted to fly, they must be lesbians or prostitutes. And when they were disbanded, Mom was called onto her air base in Marana, Arizona. And they heard Arnold's voice. Ladies, thank you for flying wingtip to wingtip with your brothers. Your services are no longer needed. Please find your own way home. Mom had to wire her dad for money to get home to York. And then she went and joined the Red Cross in Italy for the remainder of the war. And women were then not allowed back in the cockpits of military planes again for 30 years. And many of these women didn't even talk about that time. They did their work. You know what? They did their work. If you think about back then, everyone had a role to play. I have one friend who didn't even know her mother was a WASP until her mother died, and she went through her mom's stuff. And they probably would have remained under the radar screen, except in 1976, the Air Force announced that for the first time, women will be allowed to enter the Air Force Academy, and for the first time, women will fly military planes. That was the wrong thing to say to a group of WASP. Have you forgotten us? And I got to tell you, that galvanized the WASP. They created their own organization, their charters, their bylaws, and they began lobbying Congress. Those WASP did, and the kids of WASP. We call ourselves cows, kids of WASP. Got it? Of course, the spouses didn't like it. That made them sows. But too bad, too bad. And with that lobbying, with the attention of Barry Goldwater and Hap Arnold's son, finally then, they were granted retroactive military status. And Mom got honorable discharge papers. And I said, Mom, what does that mean to you? She said, it means I can have a flag on my coffin. The flag was really important to Mom. For as long as I can remember, once we kids left home, every morning Mom would get up, turn on the coffee, walk outside with this small flag pole and stick it in the ground. And at night, she would bring that thing back in. And she told her neighbors, if you don't see it, come check on me. Something could be wrong. Well, I thought you'd like to see. She loved Veterans Day. She loved to be able to put anything on that said I was a WASP. Look at that grin on her face. Is she one happy camper? And then fast forward with me, we've now finally had, thanks to Kay Bailey Hutchinson, Senator, Republican from Texas, and Barbara Mikulski, I'll say it wrong, Mikulski. She was a Democrat from Maryland. Along with them, they got the Congressional Gold Medal signed by Obama. Now, I want you to look at this picture very carefully because the truth of the matter is there are only 34 WASP remaining. In this picture, the white-haired WASP, all of them, they're gone. But I want you to notice that 3 over, it would be my left, is a very lovely, lovely woman, black hair, got a lot of medals on it. That is Colonel Nicole Malachowski. Nicole... My Air Force buddy should know Nicole Malachowski. I've known Nicole for years because, you see, once those WASPs galvanized, they would meet every 2 years in a reunion. Cities throughout the U.S., but the one criteria was it had to be next to an air base because they were getting on that air base. And Nicole was one of the many women that I met, that I would see women from every branch of the service come and sit at the WASP feet and say, tell us a story. And they would say, because you did, we can. That's a lesson for all of us. You see, it's what you do that is generative. And Nicole said that her inspiration were the WASP. Nicole was the first Thunderbird pilot. She headed up a fighter squadron. She's a Washington Fellow. She was an aide to Michelle Obama. She is now retired and speaking about those adventures. But because the WASP did, that gave her an idea, an impetus, just like what you do is an idea and an impetus for the people who will follow you. Now, when I think about moving and going fast forward, that's the Congressional Gold Medal. That's what it looks like. It was signed in 2009. The service was held in Congress in 2010. Mom, by now, was physically and mentally too incapacitated for us to bring her from California to Washington. So my sister and brother and I went on Mom's behalf to this amazing service. But I thought it's not fair that Mom doesn't get her a gold medal ceremony. So I decided I'd create her own gold medal ceremony. And a month later, with the help of Colonel Michael Coolidge, who the Air Force had assigned to Boeing up in LA, I said, would you help me create a gold medal ceremony for Mom? Mom had now stepped down into the memory care unit at Aegis Living in Laguna Niguel. Well, I got to tell you, Michael helped me. We had over 200 people in Aegis. We had press. We had honor guard. And Michael Coolidge brought down 3 of his female pilots. We had music. It was incredible. And this is Major Deidre Gurry, giving the gold medal to Mom. And Major Gurry is a test pilot. Was at that point in time, was a test pilot for the C-130. And when they flew that C-130 and tested it, there were all females in the cockpit. It was an incredible experience. But I have to tell you what Boeing did, which I thought was really special. They made Mom a flight suit. Here she is in her flight suit. You see little Fifi? Fifi sitting up there over on her right shoulder. And literally a month after that, Mom had a stroke that took out her entire left side. And for the next 17 months, she was either in bed or when we could get her out in a reclining wheelchair. Now let me fast forward. It is now November of 2011. And I've been approached by Jill Bond, who wanted to do a documentary for PBS on the WASP, and asked would I help bring WASP together. Aegis had said that we could use the library to interview these women. And one of these amazing women was Beverly Biesmeyer. Biesmeyer had been Mom's Baymate We loved Beezy. She lived over in Laguna Woods. She lived by herself, except she'd have caretakers during the day. And Beezy, well, will you come? Will you be interviewed? Absolutely. Can I talk to your mom? Well, by now, Mom was going in and out. There are times in which her eyes would never open. We'd think she was in a coma. And then she'd come back again. She was up and down so much, I called her Yo-Yo Ma. You know, if you've ever dealt with anyone with dementia, you know you got to find some kind of sense of humor in it because it's the only way you're going to get through. In fact, it's amazing the kinds of things that would stick back in their brain. Before I had to put Mom in the bed, when I could get her in a wheelchair, if I'd wheeled her out and she'd hear a plane, she'd just look up and she'd say, "You lucky stiff." So anyway, so I said, "You're a Beezy, come on." So I wanted to show you Bev Biesmeyer, because Mom, who wouldn't open up her eyes, Beezy grabbed Mom's hand and said, "Hey, Doc, it's me, Beezy." And Mom opened up those little blue eyes, and they talked for about 5 minutes. And if you want to get the PBS documentary, it's called We Served Too, T-O-O, the movie. I talked to Jill Bond yesterday. It used to be you had to get the DVD. Now you can go on Vimeo and you can watch it for free. Many of the women that are on there are no longer with us. But there are two stories I want to tell you because it makes the point that I think is important for you. And it has to do with Beezy. Beezy was not a tiny woman. She had cancer multiple times. And when she was 98, and I was visiting with Beezy, she told me that the week before, there was a production crew that wanted to get her into an AT6 because they were going to do more filming. Now, I got to tell you, at the size at which Beezy is, it was not, "Beezy, how did you do that?" "I don't know, child. They kind of pushed and shoved and had some kind of elevator thing and got me in the back of the AT6. She said, "It was wonderful." "Well, that's great, Beezy." And yes. And then I asked the pilot, could I do some slow rolls? "Beezy, no, you didn't." "Well, yes." And when they finally got me out, the pilot said he had never had anybody handle those rudders so smoothly. "Beezy, you didn't tell him, did you?" She said, "Child, he would have needed another pair of pants." You see, Beezy had macular degeneration. She could only see out of a pinprick. I said, "Beezy, how did you do that?" "By feel, child, by feel." What do you do that by feel you could keep doing? And the one final thing I want to share with you, because no one knows this except for the couple hundred of us who were standing on the day before the award, March 9th. We're at the base of the Airforce War Memorial, and we were told there's an event. And we're standing there, maybe 100, maybe 120 WASP, most of them in wheelchairs, walkers, all of them with escorts from every branch of the service, their families. It's a cold, crisp March 9th day in D.C. And there's a drum roll, and then suddenly, up from the Pentagon, marches an honor guard. They come to the center of those spires. They plant the flags, and a lone female voice starts singing the Star-Spangled Banner. And then I see in the distance coming, I think I saw them first, there were 4 Air Force jets. They come screaming over top of that spires. When they got to the center, one peeled off. The missing man make that missing woman formation. And then one by one, they read the names of each of the 38 who had died. And one by one, a single red rose was planted in the center of that spire. Let me tell you why I want you to hear this. Because those 38 women did not do it for a gold medal. They did it because their heart called them to service. And that's what I see in this room for everyone who is here. You are called to service. It's not for the gold medal. It's not for the missing man formation. It's because you know that to keep this nation safe and strong with all of the values that we believe, you will serve. And I honor all of you. And I say, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. Thank you. It's to you.